We just had the EU Divisional Cup. It ended in dramatic fashion with Focus and Th0masHD just about holding on to the win after a crazy final game. I'm going to break down the whole tournament for you in this video. Let's get straight into it. So this was the 4th Divisional Cup of the chapter, and we have yet another new team winning, which was of course Focus and Th0masHD, and they put in an unbelievable performance. Focus in particular was in insane form. He hit a number of solo clutches. He had the joint most eliminations with 18 and the second most damage. He just looked ridiculously good in these finals. Very nearly though, they did not win. They ended up finishing 30 points clear of second, but it could have been a different story. Th0masHD and Focus had a 65-point lead over Shark and Th0ma in second going into the final game. It's very interesting because 2 weeks ago it was actually the reverse. Shark and Th0ma had a big points lead over Focus and Th0masHD. Focus and Thomas did try to go and W key Shark and Th0ma, but they weren't able to find them and they ended up dying early on. But we had the inverse of that yesterday with Shark and Th0ma landing on Focus and Th0masHD at ripped tides in the final game. But this time it was the aggressors that were successful. Shark and Th0ma able to eliminate Focus and Th0masHD off spawn. Unfortunately, Shark and Th0ma not able to make the rest of the game count. They did camp on Cammy and get a kill in the early game, but coming into the late game they just couldn't quite make it happen. There was some controversy around the fact that Focus was spam inviting them, which did lead to Th0ma dying because he apparently couldn't see a player in the corner of his screen. But Shark and Th0ma were not able to get enough points in that final game to close the gap, and Focus and Th0masHD are the winners. Now naturally this dramatic finish did cause a little bit of drama. I'll throw some screenshots up for you now, but at the end of the day Focus and Th0masHD did put in an excellent performance. After 3 games they were in first place, managing a second, third and a fourth. Their consistency was brilliant. I actually didn't put them in my top 5 for predictions. I had them in 7th place, and that was because I felt that Seti and Dinas would probably try and fight them in a bunch of games. It didn't really end up playing out that way though. Seti left them alone a little bit more than expected, and Focus and Thomas were able to play their own game. Obviously it's not been a perfect weekend for this duo, as they did fail to make the Esports World Cup qualifier finals, but listen, this Divisional Cup win proves what we already knew. These guys are one of the top teams in EU right now. I would go as far to say they're probably in the top 3 alongside Shark and Th0ma and Sky and Scroll. They are looking really good at the moment, and it will be interesting to see where they're at come FNCS. Now let's move on to the team that came second, which you might expect to be Shark and Th0ma, but no, they actually ended up finishing in 3rd. The team in second is of course Vico and Malibuca, and I want to give them a lot of credit for their performance because I thought they were excellent. They did have a bit of a slow start, but a lot of that was because they were being contested by the French duo of Kavit and Shaywars over at the Mountain Drop, and because of that they were eliminated relatively early in 2 of the games. It wasn't necessarily the spawn fights, more just the early to mid game fights with this particular duo that they did struggle with. But listen, they came back in style, winning the final 2 games to secure a 2nd place, and honestly had they been uncontested it would have been their win. Really and truly these guys have a great setup at the moment. Their Mountain Drop works brilliantly. They can build up the big ramp, wingsuit into zone without taking damage. In terms of their game strategy, in terms of everything they've got worked out, it is looking great for them, and it will be interesting to see whether they can continue that into the new season when obviously the meta is going to completely change. We may have map changes too. We'll see if they can keep this consistency, if they can keep performing at this level. But let's not forget, it was only a week or 2 ago that I was talking about how Vico and Malibuca were out of form, and they have bounced back in style. Vico in particular has just been so good lately. He had the top damage and the top eliminations in this tournament. Such an explosive player, such a great fighter, and it's brilliant to see him doing well. Let's go through the rest of the top 10. In 3rd place we of course had Shark and Th0ma, and listen, I do feel like these guys played a very good tournament. The decision to land on Thomas and Focus in the final game was certainly the correct one. It did work out for them. Unfortunately they just couldn't play out the end game to their normal standard. Had they been able to, then they could have got the win. Listen, they did make a couple of mistakes during the tournament. In game 3 Shark actually fell off height and Th0ma died soon after. Had that not happened then they could have secured a lot more points, but ultimately 3rd place is a great finish. They've made every single Divisional Cup Finals this chapter. They've looked brilliant lately. They did win the Divisional Cup in week 2, and I fully believe that they could go and win another one in the next 2 weeks. In 4th place we had Chino and Pablo Wingu, by far the hardest team to predict in the lobby because they're always landing over at Sandy Strip, and you never quite know whether they're going to be splitting it or whether they're going to be fighting all the teams that are over there. For this tournament they did split the POI, and because there's so much loot there they were able to have a good Cup. 4th is a good finish. They'll probably be upset they couldn't break into the top 3, but 4th, a very consistent result. They are looking great lately. One team that I didn't expect to do as well as they did is the team that came 5th, which was Shawfort and Repairs. This is definitely a surprise pick, not a team that I would have expected to make the top 10, but they played excellently. Repairs in particular was on fire. He had the 3rd most damage and was joint 3rd for eliminations with 15. He really looks good yesterday. They landed at the south split near Battlewood Boulevard, and they were able to take advantage of all the chaos happening around them. There were obviously the fights south of Battlewood to their west, and of course the whole desert area to their east, where there was lots of teams as well. So they were able to just third party all these fights, get a lot of damage. It was a really good strategy for them, and it did pay off. Credit to them. In 6th place we had Cringe and Volko, and these guys have been very consistent, landing at the mid-map area, making that work for them. Obviously with the new Storm Surge, the net damage surge, landing in the mid-map does make a lot of sense because you don't have to make as many rotations in theory, so you're not going to get tagged up as much. And Cringe and Volko are making that work to their advantage. Another top 10 finish from them. They did finish in the top 10 last week as well. Very consistent stuff. They'll also be super happy because they have now made the Esports World Cup qualifier finals. They initially finished in 6th place, but one of the teams above them did get removed from the leaderboard, as I predicted in my previous video. So now Cringe and Volko are inside the top 5 and they will be participating. In 7th place we have Sky and Scroll, and it's hard to know how to feel about these guys right now. On the one hand, I do believe they have been the best team in the world for this chapter. They haven't finished outside of the top 10 in all the divisional cups. They've been so consistent, but on the other hand, they haven't been able to break into that top 5 since they won the first divisional cup a few weeks ago. They did struggle with their off spawn situation, which is what I predicted in my previous video. I did just feel like with the amount of teams landing at Battlewood, with the potential for a team to randomly drop there to have a big game, it is quite a volatile situation. And I'll put a screenshot up on the screen now of one of the games where they just couldn't stop being fought. Every time they just tried to get away, there was another team ready to fight them, and unfortunately that is the risk you take landing at such a big POI. But listen, Sky and Scroll clearly have quality, and as I mentioned last week when they had a similar finish, if the fact that they're coming 7th is seen as a failure, that says a lot about the standards that they're setting. It says a lot about their quality, and I do believe that they can come back in the next 2 weeks and probably manage at least the top 3, if not a win. It is worth noting that in the games where they weren't fought too much off spawn, they did perform. A lot of the issues that they faced were kind of out of their hands. It just sucks that Battlewood is such a volatile POI because that is going to affect their performance from time to time. Running through the rest of the top 10, in 8th place we had Acer and Podesai. These guys should be aiming to qualify for the Summit Land. They have looked solid lately. They were able to win game 4 in this tournament. They're not a duo that I think are going to be winning tournaments anytime soon, but they are a team with a lot of quality, and I do reckon they can make that top 20 in Major 1. We had Dom and Demis in 9th place. Again, not a bad finish, but they're not really breaking into the top 3. They're not really hitting the heights that they were able to do in trio season just yet. I do want to see a little bit more from them, but at the end of the day, it is still a top 10, so that is something to celebrate. In 10th place, we had Khan and Faded Pigeon, and these guys have had a really good week. They were able to qualify for the Esports World Cup Finals on Friday, so clearly something is working with these two. They obviously have some good chemistry. We'll see how they get on in the Esports World Cup Finals today. But 10th place, very solid. I also want to give a shout out to Pradage and Gonzo in 11th because they are qualifying for basically every tournament at the moment. Yes, they're not quite able to get those top 10s in divisional cups, but they are having some pretty impressive placements, often finishing inside the top 15, the top 20. They also did qualify for the Esports World Cup Qualifier 2 finals. Listen, they're looking very good. I mentioned in the last video, Pradage is obviously a very capable leader. Gonzo, a bright prospect from Norway, someone who is definitely up and coming. Expect to see this duo a lot more over the next few months. Now let's get into some of the teams that did struggle a little bit more. In 15th place we had Squizzy and Pixie. Now I predicted these guys to come second because they had Lethal Labs uncontested. Unfortunately it didn't quite play out that way for them. Most of the games they were uninterrupted there, but there were a few where they had teams dropping on them. In game 4 Akira and Rax landed there, and in game 6 Lixium and Nosif. So clearly Lethal Labs is a little bit like Battlewood Boulevard, almost a little bit like Slurpy Swamp in Reload, where because it is such a good POI, because there is so much loot there, it's just a target for teams looking to have a comeback game, and that is definitely something to factor in when these teams have big POIs on con, especially in EU where there's less of a culture of respecting people's POIs, where you will just get landed on regardless of how good a player you are. It definitely is a risk for these teams. But listen, Swizzy and Pixie weren't too bad. They did actually win a game. They missed one, unfortunately, which is probably why they finished outside of the top 10. I imagine had they been able to play that extra game out, they probably could have had a better performance. But ultimately, it's not a top 5, it's not a top 3, and Swizzy and Pixie, two players of that quality, you would expect them to be challenging a little bit higher. But of course, we do have 2 weeks of the Divisional Cup left. Let's see if they can secure a win in either of those. Unsurprisingly, the spawn fight over at Bumpy Bay was not productive for either team. We had Cammy and Hari finishing in 16th, while iDrop and Marius came in 30th. And as I keep saying in these videos, as long as these guys are landing on each other, as long as they are contesting each other, neither of them are going to do well. They are just going to keep cancelling each other out, and it will be interesting to see how iDrop and Marius can do if they get their POI uncontested. Obviously, Cammy and Hari did have a chance to play Uncon last week and it didn't work out for them. I'd be interested to see how iDrop and Marius do, especially as they looked great in Thursday's Eval Cup. We'll have to see if that happens. There's 2 weeks of opportunities for it, but ultimately not a great performance from either of them yesterday. We also had Chap and Flixie underperform. They finished in 17th from uncontested Classified Canyon. I know that whole desert area is quite dense, there's a lot of teams that land there, but ultimately we expect a lot more from Chap and Flixie out of an Uncon POI. They have got to be getting into that top 5. Last week's champions Yapko and Panzer failed to defend their title, only managing a 34th place finish. Definitely an off week from them. We had Vanya and Wox in 46th, and I'm going to say it right now, it's time for these guys to split. It's not going to happen for them. When they formed, I just didn't feel like it was going to work. I did mention in the video that I wasn't excited by them at all. It just feels like a last minute team, like 2 players that couldn't find anyone else and just got forced to play with each other. And that's kind of how it's been playing out. Like, they don't seem to be that comfortable together. They're not getting good placements. They're not even really qualifying for that much. And when they do qualify, they don't do that well. They failed to make the Esports World Cup Finals, not even being close to making it, in all honesty. And 46th yesterday just isn't good. I do think that we need to see both of these players find new options, because they're too good to be struggling this much. And we had another big team struggle, but this one has already split. And that is, of course, Akira and Rax, who finished 47th. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out who Akira is going to play with. Of course, he will go back to Karama. And if you watch my previous videos, you'll know that that was probably going to happen regardless of how they did. I think it would have taken Akira and Rax to get a really, really high placement in order for them to stick. Akira and Karama are too good together. They did brilliantly in the Esports World Cup qualifier. I have predicted them to make the LAN event, and yeah, they're just so good. Their chemistry is great. This Akira and Rax duo was a bit of fun, but it was never going to last. In terms of Rax's options, this is where it gets interesting, because obviously Mr. Savage fans will be hoping that he plays with him. Whether this is going to happen, I'm not entirely sure. I do think that Rax is a little bit better than Savage, if we're being honest, and potentially he may be able to find some better options. Maybe he goes and plays with Vanya. Maybe we see those duos do a switch. That would be interesting to see. But listen, Akira and Rax is no more, and I think we all saw that coming. We've still got a lot to talk about. I want to go over some new duo news. I want to talk about BloodX's tweet regarding skins, but before then, let's go over my predictions for the Divisional Cup and see how I did. I had Sharkantini to win, and they did finish 3rd, ultimately not that far away. You can then see, looking at the table, that it was a bit of a mixed bag, with players like Vico and Malibuca and Sky and Scroll. I wasn't too far off, but obviously with Chap and Flixie, with Yapko and Panzer, there's a couple of misses there. I'd be interested to hear how you guys got on. Remember, I do predictions for every set lobby finals over on my Twitter, and I'd love you guys to get involved. The most accurate predictions will always be featured in my video. So yeah, come and get involved with that. Now let's briefly talk about NA Central, and honestly there isn't a whole lot to go over here. I will just make you aware that the highest placing EU team was Malibuca and Panzer, and they came in 13th place. They actually only played out 5 of the 6 games. Had they been able to play that 6th game, then it could have been a different story. They could have probably made it inside that top 10. They were really, really good throughout. They actually managed the 3rd place on NA Central, which is super, super impressive. We had a bunch of EU teams in these finals, and they're all up on screen now for you to see how they did. Now I want to talk about this BloodX tweet where he gives some ideas on how skins should be changed in Fortnite. He states here that when you're playing the game, other players should appear to have random skins to avoid teaming, as players can often remember what skins their enemies are wearing and potentially not shoot at them or target them. It could go both ways. Now listen, this is an interesting idea. I do think it's a good attempt at stopping teaming. I don't think it would work in practice. Firstly, because it wouldn't 100% stop teaming at all, because there's so many other ways to do it. Skin teaming is just one facet of that, and even then, I mean, you know what teams are landing around you, you know that there's only a finite amount of duos that could be near you, and just because you don't know their exact skins, it doesn't mean you can't have a good stab at who they are. But the main reason why this could never happen is that Fortnite skins are super, super important for the game, and what I mean by that is that competitive is basically an advertisement for the game to get you to buy skins, to get you to spend money. And the way that kind of works is that the competitive players have their skins that they main, they have the skins that are attached to them, that are connected to them, and because of that, a lot of players tend to buy them. Alternatively, you have players trying out new skins in tournaments, advertising them to the fans, and I'm not really sure that Epic would implement BloodX's strategy, as it is so important to have the skins on show. Now listen, that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. In the past, we've seen events where you have had to wear the same skin, where you've been able to select a series of skins and then they've been randomized. So Epic has kind of played around a little bit with similar ideas to this. I just think that this might be a little bit too extreme for them, having players connected with skins. You have Reet with the Focus skin, Clicks with the Spark Plug skin, for example. Having that is very important to the game, and I don't think they'd want to do anything that might jeopardize that. And in terms of duo news, it's nowhere near as exciting over here on EU as compared to NA. Obviously, we now have Peterbot playing with Th0, which is apparently confirmed, but I will believe that when I see it. We also have Cold with Rapid and Canada with Curve. A lot of chaos going on over there. No such chaos on EU, save for the fact that Akira has gone back to Karama. We now know that Mappy is looking for a duo, as is Globshi, but no big snakings as of yet. Potentially could be on the horizon though. We'll have to see how that goes. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you can stay up to date with European Fortnite. If you want to support me any further, then using code SPUDSON in the Fortnite item shop is a great way to do that. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.